So hello to Michael, and just to introduce myself, I'm Berylin Moore, Principal Social Worker for Adult Social Care in Greenwich and Head of Service for Practice Development. Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, so hello everyone. My name's Professor Michael Preston-Shoot and I'm the Independent Chair of the Greenwich Safeguarding Adults Board.
So welcome everyone, and welcome Michael to this little short podcast we're doing. And just to introduce the theme for this podcast, I'm going to be having a conversation with Michael to talk about his role, so that we have an understanding of his role as the chair, have an understanding of the Safeguarding Adults Board. We're also going to talk about what is a SAR, which is a Safeguarding Adult Review, and also have a conversation about who can make the referral. So to start with, Michael, we understand that you are the chair of the Safeguarding Adult Board. So would you tell us a bit about your role and what exactly is the SAB and the Safeguarding Adult Board?
Okay, so every local authority in England must, by law, 2014 Care Act, have a Safeguarding Adult Board, and the local authority must work closely with the local police and the local ICB as the other two statutory partners in constituting the Safeguarding Adult Board and ensuring its compliance with the rules and the regulations that accompany the 2014 Care Act. Most boards have independent chairs, and I am the independent chair in Greenwich. It is not a requirement to have an independent chair, but the statutory guidance that accompanies the 2014 Care Act encourages boards to have an independent chair. And I've been the independent chair in Greenwich since November 2021. The duties of a Safeguarding Adult Board are covered in Section 43 of the Care Act, and there are three duties. One is to ensure that the board produces a strategic plan, which is routinely updated. The second is that the board produces an annual report, which is scrutinised by the local authority's elected members and senior leaders in the ICB, the police and Health Watch. And the third duty is to commission and complete Safeguarding Adult reviews when the criteria for reviews in Section 44 of the Care Act are met. The statutory guidance that accompanies the 2014 Care Act outlines other roles and responsibilities for a Safeguarding Adult Board, the key one of which is to ensure that adult safeguarding across the partnerships in Greenwich is effective. And the board in Greenwich does that by means of scrutiny of performance data, through the commissioning and completion of audits, through assurance reports which are requested on particular issues from particular services, and through the provision of multi-agency learning and development opportunities. In terms of Safeguarding Adult reviews, there are three criteria which, if met in Section 44 of the Care Act, means that the Safeguarding Adult Board must commission a Safeguarding Adult review. And those three criteria are where an adult with care and support needs has died or experienced significant harm as a result of abuse or neglect, including self-neglect, and where there is concern about how services worked together in order to safeguard that individual from abuse or neglect, including self-neglect. Where those criteria are met, the Safeguarding Adult Board must commission a review. Where those three criteria are not met, at least not in full, But where the board believes that useful learning could be accrued from conducting a review, the board has discretion to commission a review. So we have both mandatory reviews and discretionary reviews. The discretionary reviews can be as much about good practice as about concerns about practice. So if you are a practitioner or an operational manager, or indeed a senior leader across health, housing, social care, uniform services, third sector services, if you can identify good practice within a particular human story that you think would benefit from wider dissemination in order to promote the effectiveness of adult safeguarding, make a referral. If you are aware of a human story where an individual has experienced and possibly died as a result of abuse or neglect, and you are concerned about shortcomings in how agencies worked with that individual to safeguard them from abuse or neglect, make a referral. And how to make a referral is indicated on the Greenwich Safeguarding Adult Board website. And indeed, I would strongly encourage all of you to routinely look at the website, because not only does it give you an idea about how to make a referral, but it also includes the learning from completed safeguarding adult reviews. It also includes our strategic plan. It also includes our annual reports, and it includes policies and procedures, and indeed learning and development opportunities. So it is a rich resource, which I would strongly encourage you all to routinely consult.
Thank you. That's a very insightful. So I've got a few reflective questions of my own. So thinking about your role of the chair, Michael, why does the chair have to be independent?
I think there are advantages to a chair being independent, because the chair is outside of not just the three statutory partners, the local authority, the police, and the ICB, but actually outside of all of the partners on the board across health, housing, social care, statutory and third sector organisations. So I'm able to shine a light where necessary on the performance of individual agencies, or more often, the performance of agencies working collaboratively together in order to safeguard an adult from abuse or neglect. So without fear or favour, I can focus where I think the evidence leads us to believe that a focus is necessary. And I think that it is easier for an independent chair to do that than perhaps for a senior leader drawn from one of the organisations that comprise the partnership in Greenwich and indeed elsewhere.
So in terms of the actual board for Royal Greenwich, who are the key people that sit on that board?
Nick Davies, the Director of Adult Social Services, amongst his other roles and responsibilities, other senior leaders from the local authority, including yourself, Berylin, as the Principal Social Worker, excuse me, the Chief Nurse from the ICB, or senior leaders from the ICB delegated by the Chief Nurse in order to provide leadership from an NHS commissioning perspective, senior leaders from NHS trusts, both mental health trusts and acute care secondary trusts, so Oxley's and Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Trust for the Royal Borough, senior leaders within the police BCU that covers Greenwich along with 2 other London boroughs. Health Watch, senior leader contributions from Health Watch, and then from a variety of other third sector organisations and indeed other sections of the local authority, particularly housing, with a responsibility for social housing and indeed for counteracting homelessness. So it's a broad-based partnership. We also have representation, for example, from the Department for Work and Pensions and from the 3 custody institutions, the 3 prisons that are located within the Royal Borough.
I understand that there's quite a broad remit of the board. So how does the board ensure that all those areas of responsibility, like performance and quality assurance and learning and development, how does the board, because presumably you only meet a certain period of time during the year, is that right? So how do you delegate those functions?
Yeah, so the board itself meets 4 times a year, although occasionally it will meet more often, as indeed it has done this year, in order to receive, debate and sign off 3 safeguarding adult reviews. That required an additional meeting, but broadly the board will meet 4 times a year. Much of the work of the board is delegated to subgroups, policy and procedures, quality assurance, learning and development, and indeed a subgroup that receives referrals for safeguarding adult reviews and manages the process when reviews are commissioned. The board and the subgroups are essentially led by evidence, and that evidence comes in part from data about performance, not just of the local authority, but of the other statutory partners. And the board receives quarterly performance reports that are essentially reports on data. But the board also receives inputs, particularly at development events, from practitioners and operational managers across health, housing, social care, uniformed services, and the third sector. In other words, we're not just reliant on quantitative data. We are also inspired by the contributions from the lived experience of work of practitioners and operational managers. So we're not just listening to senior leaders, we're also very interested to hear about the lived experience of practitioners and operational managers. Their concerns, their experiences, the things that they are worried about, the things that they think could be done better. And wherever possible, we are also reaching out to people with lived experience of adult safeguarding, particularly people from seldom heard groups, for example, from the different global majority communities who live in the Royal Borough. So a variety of inputs to inform the priorities of the board, and our achievements in relation to those priorities are covered in the annual reports.
I'm interested that you were saying that you're keen to hear some of the lived experiences of practitioners and managers. However, sometimes when you think about the SAB board, as you said, it is quite strategic. There are strategic directors on that. So how would practitioners, how would operation managers be able to feed back, look, these are some of the blockages or problems or issues relating to safeguarding? What would you suggest to be the way to voice those concerns or issues to the SAB?
Well, one of the ways is to make a referral for a safeguarding adult review, the criteria for which I outlined a little earlier in this podcast. So again, I would encourage you to refer human stories for a safeguarding adult review where you have concerns, where you think the criteria in section 44 of the Act are met, but equally where you think actually practice was very solid, practice was very robust, practice was excellent. We actually succeeded in preventing abuse or neglect, or we safeguarded an individual who was experiencing abuse or neglect. So that's one way in which to contribute. A second way in which to contribute is to come to summits, conferences, seminars and webinars that we hold from time to time. We've held a very successful summit on self-neglect. We've held a very successful summit on homelessness. We propose to hold one on mental health and substance misuse, and another on domestic abuse in the coming months. We are particularly keen to hear from people with lived experience of those issues. We're also particularly keen to hear about the experiences of practitioners and operational managers who are working with people experiencing, for example, domestic abuse or hate crime or mental distress and substance misuse issues. So coming to the opportunities that we provide and contributing your lived experience of work is another way in which you can make contributions. And then raising issues specifically with me as an independent chair and with Helen Bonnewell, the business manager for the board, highlighting what you think are issues that the board should give greater attention to than you think we are doing already. And you can either do that directly, or you can do it through your operational manager, or indeed through yourself, Berylin, as principal social worker. But basically bringing to our attention issues that you think are not working as well as they should.
Thanks, Michael. And just in relation to the SAR, I was curious to know, anyone can make a SAR, and from a practice and professional point of view, who are the professionals that are making those referrals? Do you see a breadth of different professionals, or do you see it being coming from one particular agency more than another? I'm just curious to know from our my social work profession, whether social workers are feeling confident to actually say, look, this is really good practice that I want to publicize, or bring to the forefront, or actually, what, I was really concerned about this particular resident and the outcome for them, and things could have been better. So just keen to know who's actually making those referrals for SARS.
Almost all of the referrals we get are referrals of concern about shortcomings in how individuals were safeguarded from abuse or neglect. We get very few referrals of human stories where the referrer believes that practice was excellent, good, robust, effective. So I would strongly encourage people not just to think about those human stories where there were shortcomings, but actually also to think about human stories where individuals were safeguarded effectively. Referrals come from a wide range of organisations: the local authority, the police, housing colleagues, colleagues working in the NHS, either the ICB or the Mental Health Trust or the Acute Care Trust. So referrals come from a variety of sources. They usually come through operational managers or senior leaders. For example, Simon, who heads up adult safeguarding, the adult safeguarding team in the borough, or from yourself, Berylin, as the principal social worker, or indeed from another operational manager within the local authority. But referrals do not necessarily have to come from either a senior leader or an operational manager. Anybody can make a referral, and that actually also includes the person with lived experience of abuse or neglect where they have survived, and or family members who are concerned about a particular human story. So anybody can make a referral.
That's really helpful. So I think if you've got any closing comments, it'll be useful to have, Michael, because I know in the next recording, we want to get more into the detail about some of the SARs that have come through for Greenwich. But yeah, so in terms of any closing comments for yourself before we finish?
Consult the Safeguarding Adult Board website in Greenwich. Do so regularly. And tell us about your human stories, both the work that you and others are proud of, and there is excellent work going on within the local authority and across the partnership, but also tell us, make sure we know about the issues and the concerns that you have about how we collectively are responding to individuals who are at risk of or experiencing abuse or neglect.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.